Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on Island Sanctuary. This was a new piece of content that was introduced in patch 6.2, and it's just supposed to be a slice of life break from all the world-ending activities we've been dealing with in the game's main scenario. You get an island, you gather, craft, and earn rewards, and you can take it as seriously or not seriously as you want. It's your island, and you'll do with it what you will. But I've had a couple of weeks to mess around with it. I've taken it probably more seriously than a lot of other people have, and so I'm ready to share some thoughts on what I liked, what I think can be improved going forward. So with that, let's get started. So for unlocking your own island, you can unlock it as soon as you complete Endwalker's base main scenario quest, essentially patch 6.0. The reason for this makes sense. We saved the world and we're given an island, and it's pretty much as we expected with a few little tricks thrown in. But honestly, it'd be kind of nice if this was a feature that could unlock at lower level for newer players. It just doesn't feel like I should have to be level 90 to do the content that this is asking me to do. So maybe they'll change that in the future, but I sincerely doubt it. Once they commit to when you unlock something, I don't think we've ever seen that really change, minus a few quests being mixed around. Also, despite the fact that I said you would be gathering and crafting, it's not really traditional gathering and crafting, so you don't need any disciples of hand or land leveled for this. It's a whole thing that's just isolated on its own. But once you have it unlocked, the gist of the content is that you're given an island and expected to live off the land, or at least prove that it can be done. As you build, gather, farm, and raise animals, you'll level up your island, which will unlock more features and building opportunities. This in turn lets you improve profits from your workshops on the island. These workshops don't make real gil for you. You earn a localized currency called cowries, but these can be used to buy mounts, minions, dyes, materia, as well as a number of other things. When you get on the island, you'll go through a tutorial that's pretty straightforward for the first couple of hours, but after that, it's kind of let you do whatever you want. Of course, there's only so many things you can do, and you probably have an idea of how you want to advance the island at that point, but when it gives you the open direction, I don't mind that, but I kind of wish there was a feature where I could set up like a checklist. Like, oh, okay, I know that there's this NPC that is looking for these materials, and maybe if I need this many cowries to unlock the next part of the pasture, I'd like to be able to mark those things in like my duty list, for example. It wouldn't be too many different things, but I just like the idea of having that in the game instead of having to manually do it maybe on like a document or something like that. I would also recommend using the timers feature if you're someone who's really trying to be hardcore about it, but you don't need to go that far. It's just one little thing I think that they could improve. Now, there's all sorts of structures on the island, and they all have different features, but your layout will be generally the same. You can build some things in slightly different locations, and some may even visually change depending on where you build them, but you're given plots, and these plots all have specific purposes in mind. So let's cover what each of the different structures does. The first thing you'll be building as part of the tutorial is your actual kind of home base. I just call it home. It's just a basic facility that lets you interact with some mammoths and buy items with cowries, or even sell excess materials to get more cowries. It has an orchestrion in it that is cool, but I guess they were kind of impressed at the idea of making it, I guess the sound was centralized around where the orchestrion is. So as you move away from it, it very quickly gets quieter and quieter. Heck, even if you use your idle camera and it just kind of zips around to the different things in your vicinity, it even moves that. So while it's a neat little thing, I kind of just wish the orchestrion had a setting that would be a consistent volume across the entire island, or at least a consistent volume in my home base as a whole. Then you have the pasture. This is where you'll place captured animals. You can make nets and they have different sizes, and then the monsters have different sizes on the island. When you successfully catch one, it gets sent back, and your pasture will gradually grow as you upgrade the island, starting with only 5 animals that you can capture, all the way up to 20. The function here, though, is very simple. You feed them and collect items from them daily, and then you'll use those to make items in the workshop. In a similar function is the farm. You plant seeds and you harvest crops every 2 days. You'll need to make sure that they're watered, which can happen automatically if it rains on the island, but just in case you probably want to water them yourselves. Most of the seeds you can buy, well, most of the seeds you can get, you'll have to buy with blue cowries, and those are usually used for rarer recipes when you're going to the workshop, but there are a few that are also found on the island themselves, and those can be great for just making things like animal feed. Then you have the Granary. Now this actually collects island materials once per day at the cost of a few blue cowries. You can even set it up to do the same exact path multiple times throughout the week, basically paying 50 cowries per day. Now, it doesn't just collect island materials, it also has Granary exclusive materials. And my personal recommendation, try to get to the point where you have 12 of each of the Granary materials. This will be pretty tough to do early on because you won't be earning as much until you upgrade the facilities. But once you get to that point, it just makes your life a little bit easier. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I wish you could actually set a schedule or a calendar with the granaries though. Every day, I sometimes just need to move it. Like, I don't need this material, but I need this material the next day. So I have to log in and then set it up. I wish you could kind of set it on its own automatic path, even if it had a slightly increased cost. So that way I don't have to choose, I either just want to send you on the same thing for one day and change it every day, or send you on the same path for multiple days. Just trying to expand the options that it has. Then you have landmarks. Now these are largely aesthetic, but they do actually have a functional purpose as well. For each landmark that you have, regardless of which one it is, it improves your maximum groove. Now groove is a stat that's present in the top right of your workshop, and for every one groove that you have, it increases your profits by 1% until the week resets, and then your groove goes back down to 0. So make sure you stay on top of building the landmarks, but don't worry about which ones you actually have. And finally, something I've been referencing this whole video so far, the workshop. This allows you to schedule your mammoths to craft and sell items for blue cowries. You'll need to carefully note the popularity and supply throughout the week in order to maximize profits. Your mammoths have also unionized too, so they'll get 2 days off per week. I recommend always taking Tuesdays off for weekly reset so you can look at the market and analyze it for a day. And then, just kind of as a safety precaution, set the second day to Monday, which would be the last day in your weekly reset. That's just so if you want to adjust it, you can, because it's all the way at the end of the week and you're not committed to that being the off day until it actually happens. So you could always move that off day in the middle of the week to a day where maybe the profits won't be as good, or maybe you'll be out of town and can't log into the game, or any reason that you have at all. But those are some base recommendations. Now, of course, there's more depth to each of these aspects, especially the workshop. Your pasture animals, for example, have their own moods based on what you feed them. The better the feed, the better the mood. And there are rare and unique animals on the island with slightly swapped or differing items. This is something that you'll see people talk about a lot, whether they successfully caught a rare creature, because they only spawn at certain times of day and potentially under certain weather conditions. There are online websites to track when these monsters will spawn based on the weather patterns of the game, but if you don't care about all that, functionally, they're not any different. They just have different materials which are not exclusive to the rare or unique monsters. Most of the other things on the island function fairly straightforward. The farm, you're gonna, just grow crops. It's just about what you need. The granary tells you exactly the items you're gonna get, so you don't need to worry. Realistically, the workshop is the big thing you're always working around. It is the core concept of the island, and everything you do, from going out and gathering random materials to what your granary brings back, is going to be focused around optimizing your workshop. This is largely why I recommended having 12 of every granary material, because of what's optimal to do in the workshop, on some days requiring up to 12 of those granary materials, so you can just be prepared for any eventuality. Realistically, it's kind of a long process to get caught up to that point, unless you just don't take the workshop very seriously at first. You will be using the granary to get materials that let you build new things on the island and even upgrade your existing facilities. So early on, it's going to set you quote unquote behind. But again, this is slice of life, so don't take it too seriously and just kind of make a mental note of that for the future. Now, as for optimizing the workshop, I'm not going to sit here and try to explain to you every little thing. There's documents, charts, and calculators on the internet now that will optimize your workshop flow, and those are constantly being updated to come up with better ways to predict or to tell you what you want to do. That being said, if you don't want to do all that, you just want to have like a general idea of some good practices and you don't really care what the result is too much, then I do have some general advice for you. So on your first non-off day, meaning a day where your mammoths aren't taking their vacation, I'd recommend setting up all 3 workshops with 6 4-hour crafts. This will build your groove to 15% on that first day for a pretty low cost, which gives you another day of building up your materials from the granary as well. You may consider doing this 2 days in a row to get your groove to 30% early, but that first 15% is usually enough, and then you can start looking at things that will actually turn a profit. You also want to make sure that since you're flooding your market with tons of items, that you're careful about the supply. You want the supply to be either sufficient or lower in order to make sure that you have a decent income coming in, even for these groove building days. Now, once you're satisfied with your groove amount, 15, 30%, whatever, you'll ideally want to go with 4 crafts on any given day. And that can be a 4-8-4-8 split, meaning 4 hours into 8 hours into 4 hours into 8 hours, or a 4-6-8-6 split. Now, this is where it takes a little bit of, I guess, brain power in order to do it. And if that's not what you want to do, then just go nuts, earn your blue calories at whatever pace you want. You'll get everything you want eventually anyway. But the main reason why it's a choice between those two is because sometimes there are really, really well selling 6-hour crafts, usually something that's high in popularity and low in supply. And so that just optimizes if there's a 6-hour craft that meets that requirement. The 4-8-4-8 split is the same, but for, 8-hour expensive items. If the 4-hour expensive items are good too, that 4-8-4-8 becomes a little bit more attractive. But again, this is just stuff that as someone who's done this maybe a little too much, I think about and I feel like I want to talk about a little bit. The only thing that I want to add to that, though, is that the 2 big things you're looking for your profits are popularity and supply. The predicted shift at the end is just it predicting what the popularity is going to be next week. So take it into account when you're thinking about next week, if you're thinking that far ahead, but don't worry about it too much. The demand shift, on the other hand, is something that can influence your in-week decisions. If something is looking like it's going to plummet and it's not going to be popular, then what was otherwise an insufficient supply before may become a sufficient supply the next day. So you always have to play those a little bit carefully, looking for things that are either staying the same in terms of what their demand shift looks like, or looks like their demand shift will actually go up. Try to avoid things that are plummeting, but it can still work out. Now, as you can tell, I'm actually pretty into Island Sanctuary. I don't really post a lot of content about it on my channel, but I'm into the whole kind of RPG/life sim combination thing. I just don't make a whole lot of time for it anymore, outside of Animal Crossing when the most recent one of those hit, and I was obsessed with the idea of getting blue roses. Yeah, I like the stuff that takes maybe more work than these games are really demanding of the player, but it is what it is. It's just a fun little thing for me to get my mind off of everything. And Island Sanctuary absolutely fits that bill. Even if I am putting all that extra brain power into trying to optimize it, it's still kind of relaxing for me. And it can be way more relaxing for you than it is for me, because you don't have to care about any of that stuff. It doesn't matter what your island is doing versus what somebody else's island is doing. Their actions don't affect your supply, don't affect your demand. It's all isolated to you. So don't worry about all the min-max stuff. I'm just giving you the lowdown on every different aspect of it. Now, that being said, Square Enix often introduces new content to us, and we get it in, I guess, almost a beta state, almost literally with things like the Adventurer played as of late. So what we have here is the most basic of basic implementations, where you'll probably just spend most of your time out gathering items and making sure that you have a sufficient amount of those. If you're hardcore, you'll go out and just grind those items nonstop to level up your island faster, and that's what I did in about 2 or 3 days, of just my normal stream hours, about 20 hours total to get a rank 10 island, just gathering, and doing upgrades as they became available. But when you do this that often or for that many hours, you do really start to notice a lot of little things that you wish they would improve. I already mentioned the Orchestrion, but it's really just the range of activities on the island. The fact that there's no fishing is actually a huge surprise. There's spear fishing, go out into the water and, just go to gathering points, but there's no actual fishing. Nothing like even what is in the base of Final Fantasy XIV. And for slice of life style games, fishing is usually a pretty major thing. There's also no hands-on cooking or any sort of activity. Everything just goes through the workshop. It's all automated, so there's not as much immersion as a feature like this kind of should be known for, I feel. There's also the rare creatures, which, forgetting the fact that they were kind of bugged for the first couple of weeks, aren't as interesting as they could be, but you gotta remember, I'm an avid Pokemon shiny hunter, so when I heard there were rare creatures on the island that would only appear under certain conditions, I maybe started getting flashbacks to opening 500 eggs or something like that. Crazy, not something I would expect other people to do. But instead, there are these very scripted encounters that's just a matter of, are you logged in at the right time, and did you get lucky enough to succeed in catching them? If not, you can end up waiting a day or two before you even get a chance to throw one net and fail again. I would prefer something that gives the player a little bit more agency to make it happen, but has a better chance of actually catching them. You know, for example, let's say that if there's a rare Opo or a rare Mandragora on the island, but it only appears after you've caught 50 of the other Mandragoras. Now I have to go and make sure I have enough nets and make sure that I'm willing to go through that. It's something I can actively work towards instead of just waiting for it to happen and praying. So I don't mind if they actually mix and match those things, but I do kind of want them to add player agency to making things like that happen for the spawn conditions. Honestly, my biggest complaint, you know, I've had a lot of little things here or there that I think they could improve, but the user interface for the workshop is probably my actual biggest complaint. All those other things are things I'd like to see improve, but I otherwise enjoyed. But the workshop UI is actively infuriating. There's so many different menus that you cannot access without leaving one menu and going into the other. Probably the biggest example of this is when you want to search by the demand. So you go into the demand menu, it shows you the popularity, it shows you the supply, but you don't know how long these crafts are going to take. You don't know, you have to open another menu in order to see what materials they're actually going to be made of. And it's just clunky, because then if you want to see those different details, like the base value of it, the amount of hours it takes to craft, if you haven't memorized those things, you have to leave and go to a different menu that allows you to place them in. And all of that information I feel like could be made much more concise with just a few symbols and a little pop-up that appears on the screen, and not all of these words and charts and menus and all those things like that. So that workshop's probably the number one thing. Also, you can only place things in the workshop sequentially from the start of the day to the end of the day. So I'd really like to see them allow you to kind of just place items in the workshop schedule, so it's a little bit less tedious to work around, especially if you make a mistake or you decide you want to change something. It's just a little clunkier than I think it needs to be. Same with the preset menu. I feel like that could also just be baked into one of your other things. Honestly, all three of the submenus I feel like could be baked into one menu and made far more concise. So that's definitely my biggest complaint. Also, some aspects of Island Sanctuary I don't think are adequately described. They're all in the tutorials, but I found, like with things like Groove, for example, this tiny little menu in the top right, a lot of players were a little confused about that. The efficiency bonuses and how they interact with Groove, and a few other things. They could just provide more information, but in a more concise manner. And I don't think that's asking for a whole lot, because the workshop does scare a lot of people, and only some people are willing to look past that and go online and try to figure out how everything actually works. So that is the number one thing I would like to see them improve that's already there, but they need to add more variety to the activities on the island overall. I already mentioned fishing, and I already mentioned making more player agency for the actual animals than making them spawn, but there's also just not a lot of reasons to have people visit your island. There's no way to set up activities or really almost like a party setting. It feels like it's always business, and when someone's visiting you, they're just visiting you for the sake of visiting you. You know, there's no functional reason to do it outside of hanging out. And again, slice of life, but usually there is some reason or some way that you can make players interact in this type of content, or at least reward interaction in some way, or encourage it even in some way, without making it something that's mandatory. And I know there's other things people are thinking about, being able to better customize the functionality of the buildings on the island, being given more freedom to actually place things in certain locations. The minions, while interesting, are only kind of mildly interesting. People, of course, want their mounts to roam around as well. Yoshi P's already acknowledged this request and says they're wondering about it if they can do it themselves. And so everyone has all these little things they feel like they can improve, and this just always happens when we get a brand new style of content in Final Fantasy XIV. It always feels like all the bases are there, and it can be improved upon, but we always get it in this kind of simple format that just needs improvement in some ways, and should definitely be improved if they want people to keep using it. So, decent start, but I'd like to see them, you know, tune it up a little bit and make it more interesting and more involved without making it more stressful. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for my thoughts on Island Sanctuary. Let me know what you thought in the comment section of the video below. And with that, I'm done. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.